Friends in the Corner podcast. Stories and topics from around the state of Kentucky. Welcome to Friends in the Corner podcast. Stories and topics from around the state of Kentucky. I'm your host, Dan Pauly, coming to you from beautiful Lexington, Kentucky in my quarantine headquarters. And I hope you guys are staying safe and healthy during this unique times. You know, I know right now there are a lot of stress and anxiety going on in our country with everything that's been happening since the COVID outbreak. But despite all that, it is awesome when we have something to look forward to. And for me, I have something big to look forward to this weekend, the NFL Draft. One of my favorite times of the year, the NFL Draft, the stars tomorrow. We're going to see where they're going to be playing this Sunday this season, hopefully. And some big questions are going to be answered as well. The LSU standout, Joe Burrow, is he going to return to Ohio to join the Bengals? For UK fans, where's Lynn Bowden going to wind up? A lot of great questions to be answered this weekend, and I wanted to bring someone on that was going to do this draft justice. So we're going to be talking to Angelo Carriero today. Angelo is from ESPN Radio Lexington 1300 here in town, and he's got a very strong background in draft analysis. So really excited to talk to him about all these different burning questions we have, and we even carved out a little time to talk about one of our favorite subjects as well, Wrestlemania. So you're going to hear that at the very end of the interview. But we're really excited to talk to Angelo here today. But before we get into that, I want to tell you guys that Friends in the Corner podcast is supported by listeners like you. If you want to be a part of the movement, want to help us continue to grow this show, go to our Patreon page, patreon.com/FITC podcast, to learn about the different tiers that you can help to support us in. Your support will help to continue to grow this show into the future. So come and join the likes of Tyler Witt, Trevino Woods, and Sydney Klinkenbeard who are helping to support the show on a monthly basis. Patreon.com/FITC podcast. But we've got a long interview ahead of us here, but a good one, so we're excited to bring Angelo on here to talk a little NFL draft. So without further ado, Mr. Angelo Carriero. Here we go. All right, we're back with another episode of Friends in the Corner podcast with a special guest on here today from ESPN Radio, Angelo Carriero. Angelo, how are you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing about as well as you can. Yeah. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay, all things considered. I'm here in my quarantine headquarters right now for COVID-19, so definitely a fun time. You staying safe during these unique times we find ourselves in?
Yeah, I'm trying to stay as safe as I can. It's interesting because what a lot of people might think is a 2-3 month quarantine, I'm kind of mentally prepared for this to be a year and a half. Just until whatever vaccine comes along. So I've been trying to get some different jobs, to kind of pay the way until everything kind of lightens up and whatnot. So that way at least you get a little income rolling in, and we'll see what the future holds. But right now, man, I've definitely been all right in the terms of viewing material, because a lot of people are really depressed without sports, without March Madness and without baseball season. But to me, it was just extra time to spend watching some college football cut-ups for the draft coming up. So I've definitely been occupied with checking out some guys.
Have you been splicing some Tiger King in that time too, like everybody else?
I was coaxed in to watching Tiger King by the two beards of Angelo and the Two Beards that we talked about before the show. They begged me to watch Tiger King. And I was one of those people that were like, it's too mainstream for me. I don't want to watch Tiger King because everybody's watching it. I was like, man, if everybody's watching it, I guess I'll check it out. So I binge watch it. I watched it all in one night. So yeah, I watched.
It consumes you in, man. Me and my fiance watched it all in one hit too. So before we go any farther, Carol Baskin killed her husband, yes or no?
This is going to be a hot take. And if you know anything about me, I do like to go against the grain a little bit. There was a guy in that show, in that episode that said he talked to her, dead in quotation marks husband the night before he vanished, and he said, "If I get away with this, it'll be the slickest thing I've ever done." So to me, if that's the case, I think he just kind of went off grid and disappeared and did his own thing. But
Ooh.
everybody else thinks that she killed him, so I don't know. I think he legit tried to disappear and it worked. So.
Well, happy to have you on here, Angelo. And I know we've didn't come here to just talk about Tiger King. We came here to talk a lot of a few other things as well. Before we get started and talking about the NFL draft, though, I just want to give this opportunity to give the floor to you a little bit. Can you tell my listeners about who you are and where you're from?
Yeah, I am from Lexington, Kentucky. I was originally born and raised here, and then I'm bounced around a lot in Lexington and back and forth from Richmond to Lexington. And during that time, when, like you said, we will get to talking about the NFL draft, but that was when I was about 12 years old is when I really started getting into sports. And I really started getting into sports because my grandfather really liked sports. And when I was younger, I liked everything but sport. I was into Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, like that type of thing. I was really into that kind of like mythical card realm and whatnot. Really enjoyed that. My grandpa really liked sports, and I was like, I'll try to pick this up because I started playing sports. Like everybody else, we play t-ball and soccer when we're younger, and then I started playing football when I was in about, I want to say it was either third grade or fifth grade. I wasn't too bad at it at the time, so I kind of picked that up. And when I was about 12, I found a website. Shout out to Scott Wright and draftcountdown.com. He would create this material, and I would read it, and I was really fascinated by it. I was originally fascinated by this magazine that I bought, and it was about the NFL, and in the back it had like the listings for the draft guys, and I was like, that seems interesting. Like, I guess I'll check that out. And that's how it all kind of blossomed. And I started writing my own draft guides starting when I was in seventh grade. I wrote about a 3-page little draft guide. And I typed it out and printed it off. And then the next year it was 7. And the next year it was 10. And then the next year it was 17. And by the time it was all said and done, when I made my last one before college, it was 76 pages of stuff that I wrote. Now, this wasn't front and back. It was just front because we weren't as advanced back in my day. So I wrote, and it was all on a trip to Key West, Florida to see my uncle. I was like on the car just typing, and just all that, man. I had a traumatic experience about that. I almost lost it. And I was over halfway done. So, yeah, so I'm obviously, I've always had, well, since I was 12, I don't know about always, but I've had this passion to write, talk, evaluate, do anything when it comes to the sports we watch. And, I went to college, and I figured that at some point, these guys can make money off of this. So I want to do the same thing. It's what I enjoy. And after college, I was working in retail. And one day I was like, you know what? I want to give this a shot. I want to actually do what I want to do. I guess I felt that kind of freedom. So I called up a radio station in Richmond, Kentucky, called Wallingford Broadcasting, and I was like, "You look, whatever I got to do to just get in the door. I don't care if I have to clean floors or whatever it is. I just want to be there and get my chance." And the station director, I guess he kind of liked that I wouldn't stop calling him, I guess, because I really wanted it. And you can ask my current program director, Sean C., that I can be a little pushy sometimes about wanting to do stuff. But so he had me in. 2 weeks later, I was on their Monday sports show, and I did that for about 6 months until, money dried up and I needed to get more hours. So I called up ESPN radio here in Lexington with LM Communications. And like we talked about before the show, that was almost 3 years to this very day that I did that. And I've been working there ever since, and I've had a lot of tremendous experiences and opportunities. I cover the high school football scene, in which I do play-by-play broadcasting for our football coverage, Varsity Game Night. I do sideline reporting for our high school basketball games. I get to go to every UK basketball game and football game with the job that I do there, and then I also get to go to Cincinnati and do the Bengals home games where I get credentialed, and that was all leading up to probably the most noteworthy moment I've had so far, and that's that I was in a press conference with Tom Brady, and of the 6 questions he answered before he kind of stormed out, one of them was mine. So that was kind of a pretty cool moment so far. But yeah, I've got to do a lot of stuff around here, and I want it to continue and get out and do as much as I can and experience as much of this as I can.
Oh, awesome, man. Well, it sounds like since you covered the Bengals, you might be in more than one way the perfect person to be talking to tonight here. Before I do that, because you said something that caught my attention here, what did you say to Tom Brady that made him storm out?
Oh, I'm thankfully it wasn't me. I was the one that was more like, gee shucks, Tom, they really love you here in Cincinnati. How does that make you feel? And he really liked that question until someone in the group in our media scrum asked him, your play is in verbatim, not verbatim, but your play is really dropped off this year. Why do you suck? And he didn't really like that question very much, and he was kind of done being in Cincinnati, Ohio after
Bye,
that.
Felicia. So he decided to go to Tampa instead.
Oh yeah, he jetted out. Yep. That was the last time in Cincinnati, in this greater area, that Bill Belichick and Tom Brady went back to back in press conference. So I was glad to be there for it.
Making history. So, yeah. Well, man, definitely, Angelo, happy to have you on and just to talk here even more about the draft, because it sounds like you have definitely a lot of knowledge when it comes to the NFL draft here. And
I don't know if I'd go that far, Dan. But hey, thank you for having me on your podcast. By the way, I love it.
Oh, thank you.
Podcast, man.
Well, I appreciate it. Well, I've heard Matthew Lawrence refer to you as the Mel Kiper of Lexington before, so I don't know if that's a compliment or an insult, but I'll let you take it up with him. So, well, as we kind of get in, this draft is going to look a little bit different from some previous drafts here, because with everything going on in the world with COVID-19, the coronavirus, the social distancing restrictions that kind of are facing us, this whole draft, as the NFL has put it, is going to be virtual. And Roger Goodell is going to be presenting the NFL draft from his basement, as he pointed out the other day.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's weird, but all right.
Yeah, more power to him.
Go off.
What are the odds he wears pants during his simulcast?
No, you know what? I bet the odds are less than 1%, because I guarantee you there's going to be a moment where he's wearing the blazer and the suit up top, and they don't cut away fast enough as he walks off the podium, and he's going to be wearing some like red with white polka dot boxers or something, like walking off the set. That's what
I was wondering too, is like, when you say you're going to do this in your basement, are you going to have like a stage set up, or is it going to be like what we're doing now? We're sitting on couches just talking over the internet.
Yeah, I think this NFL draft, man, even though it's virtual, I really think that one, I'm actually a little more excited for this one than if it was at Las Vegas, because I have a buddy, and he likes the pageantry. He likes the players coming on stage, the themes of the draft and whatnot, and everything that goes around the draft is kind of his favorite part about it. I'm the complete opposite. I can go without all the bells and whistles and whatnot. All I need is exactly what they are doing. Roger Goodell gets the pick, goes to the podium, announces it. They show highlights of the player, and me and my friends which who knows if that's going to happen during this quarantine time. We might have to be on FaceTime the entire draft. But we sit there and just go, oh my gosh, can you believe they made this pick? How is that going to affect the rest of the draft? What about this team? Are they going to trade this guy? Oh, that's where where Matthew gets the whole Mel Kiper thing from. That's kind of the nuts and bolts of the draft is what I enjoy. And I think that I don't think it's going to be too controversial in the way that it's set up, where, oh, what if the Zoom meeting goes out or the Skype call drops or something? All they got to do is just call in the pick like they do. You know, in the NFL draft, that's what they do anyways. They call their team table and they write down the pick on the card and give it to the Roger Goodell. So you're kind of cutting out the middleman. If any ways, it might go even smoother.
I know there's some people say like, hey, this is the NFL after all. This isn't the squeaky clean league after all. There's been teams involved, especially with a certain team in Foxborough over the
you're not lying.
who has some needs at the moment. And just to see where things go. But it's going to be very interesting to see how they're going to lay it out. I guess I read an article the other day. The way they're going to have it set up is they're going to have TV cameras in all the top prospects' living rooms.
Mhm.
But then there's going to be a second monitor they're going to do where they're going to do a virtual walk, and then that's where they're going to meet Goodell on. That's
terrible. That is terrible. Who wants to see a virtual? That'll be the goofiest thing to look back on, is to look back when Tua Tagovailoa goes up and virtually meets the commissioner. Oh my gosh, that's going to be some real comical, looking back in 20 years thing if they do that.
Definitely the format for this year is going to be very fascinating to watch. And then when we start talking about the draft as a whole, because what you've talked about, you don't care for the pomp and circumstance. You care about the players. You care about where they're going and the draft picks are going to go. And so since you have done all this research over the years with different draft leagues, when it comes to talent on paper, where do you feel like this draft class stacks up against some previous draft classes, even last year's draft class?
I think that the depth of this class is pretty normal. There are different tiers to me in which guys kind of are grouped in. I think this draft is just short of, I would say, there's probably more. I'll say this the backwards. I'm sorry. I get so flustered with the way that I enjoy the draft. So let's start at the top. The top of the draft, I think, has about 13 to 14 top 10 players, which is really good, because some drafts, if you look back at 2013, there wasn't one top 10 worthy guy, and some drafts have about 6, 7, whatever. I think this draft legitimately goes about 13 to 14 deep before you kind of see that next drop off. And that, to me, is atypical. You usually don't have that deep of a talent pool at the top of the draft. And I think that's because it's so well balanced. You've got your mix of skill players, offensive linemen, defensive linemen, and then into your back seven, it kind of thins a little bit, but you've still got some elite players in those groupings as well. So then you go kind of to that next tier. I think the draft after that kind of falls from about, like I said, about 15, 16 down to probably, I would say, about the end of the second round. And then you've got that next class that's like third to about mid fourth, and then it falls back, to where it's pretty much backup guys. So that side of the draft is pretty typical, but I would say that the top of this draft is going to be loaded with more bang for your buck players than a lot of recent drafts.
And we're going to be talking a lot about a couple different players here on this draft as well. But when you kind of look at the field of players that are there, who is it that excites you the most coming out of this draft?
Well, I guess I would say that from the guys that I've watched so far, that I think Joe Burrow is the best player in this draft. A lot of people think that it's Chase Young. And while I think that Chase Young is a very gifted pass rusher and he's going to go 2 most likely, I think a guy like Joe Burrow is – I'm not going to say he's once in a lifetime. I'm not going to say he's once in a generation per se, but he's closer to that once in a generation than just being your typical number 1 overall pick. A guy like Kyler Murray, a guy like Baker Mayfield, a guy like Jared Goff. Those guys, come around. A guy like Joe Burrow, you'd have to go back to Andrew Luck for a guy that is as good as he is. What I like most about him is his accuracy to really all parts of the field, and I really like to value deep accuracy, and he was just so perfect on a lot of his throws this year. He faced the top competition, went undefeated, was mobile. He had played in a pro style offense. He is just, when you're looking at those two players, Chase Young, super athletic, could be a Hall of Fame type of defensive end. Well, Joe Burrow can be a Hall of Fame level quarterback. And when you put those two up against each other, I'd rather have the quarterback. And so when you ask me, who's kind of the guy, it's Joe Burrow to me.
We are going to talk a lot about Joe Burrow here, because the first pick in this draft goes to the Cincinnati Bengals. which you said you cover the Bengals. And
Yeah.
just to tell you a little bit about my background too, Angelo, before I moved to Lexington, I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, just about
Oh, okay.
30 minutes north to Cincinnati. So I grew up going to a lot of Bengals games, and I went home very disappointed from a lot of Bengals games.
Hmm.
And really, for me, the Bengals are a sore subject. I don't even consider myself a Bengals fan anymore, but just to see year after year of them try to get something going and falling apart. And then we did have a little bit of a grace period where they did make the playoffs for about 5 years in a row, and they lost all 5 years after the first
Yeah.
round. So I've seen, I think, just from where I grew up, a lot of the ups and downs of the Bengals, the Cincinnati Bungles, as you would,
Hmm.
their
Yeah.
history. So how do you feel a player like Joe Burrow, what kind of impact would he have on what might be the second worst team in the NFL next to
Yeah.
the Browns?
Oh, okay. I was trying to figure it out. There you go. You say you're not a Bengals fan anymore, but right there, that's when it shows you true colors. You
Well,
still bleed orange and black.
yeah, no, actually, I am a Cleveland Browns fan now, but I am aware of our tragedy. So,
Whoa, whoa, whoa. All right, before we get any further, Dan, no, you tell me, how did you go from Cincinnati to Cleveland, and did you drop off recently? Because if it was recent, you backed the wrong horse. But I don't mean to take this podcast away from you. You tell me,
Oh,
how did you end up going from the Bengals to the Browns, which is about the only way you can slide backwards?
so there's a lot to unpack here. So, I've been a Bengals fan for the last couple of years, and
Bengals, Browns.
I was a Bengals fan up until probably up until the year that the Browns went 0-16.
Okay,
So yeah,
good time to back the Browns that
yeah.
went winless. All right, continue.
And for me, I never really had a true dedication to the Bengals franchise. Growing up in Ohio, and if you talk to anyone from Ohio, your NFL team is your secondary team. Your first team is Ohio State. But basically, it became so much of a mundane where you either get into the playoffs or not. And even if we get to the playoffs, we're losing. I was trying to find a new team to jump on. And one of my college roommates was a diehard Cleveland Brown fans. I mean, he's still a Browns fan to this day, and he's seen some of the worst of the worst. And I told him, you know what? If the Bengals do not make the playoffs this next season, I can't remember which season it was. I'll convert over to a Browns fan, because it seemed like that maybe they had more potential at that time to move forward. So Bengals didn't make the playoffs, and I said, all right, I'm a man of my word. So I switched over and I started following Cleveland Browns for them. That's when that's when the 1-15 season was, the 0-16 season. I was like, all right, I'm starting to regret my choice. Then they draft Baker Mayfield, and I'm like, yes, this is our savior. This is our Joe Burrow. And then we just missed the playoffs over and over again. So I'm still kind of struggling by, but if there's anything, because I've been a UK football fan, I've been a Reds fan, I know about patience more than anybody else, I feel, in my life.
Well, let me say this. When it comes to quarterback prospects, they are so hit and miss that I listened to a podcast with Todd McShay, and I'm glad he said it because I feel the same way. I feel like I'm really good at identifying certain positions. Offensive tackle is one of them that I feel like that I feel like I have a pretty good pulse on, including some other ones, mostly the interior and the lines, because mostly I guess because I played those positions and high school, whatever. But it's the one I can see the most. Quarterback for everyone is hard. So I had Deshaun Kaiser as my number one quarterback in 2017, and he flamed out, like completely busted. And then a guy like Baker Mayfield, I had him as like a second round guy. I thought he was like Andy Dalton to me. And that was a horrible take. It looked in 2018, looked a little better last year. A guy I was super high on was Lamar Jackson, and that panned out. So they're all just kind of it's really difficult to find a quarterback. And that's why you love a guy like Joe Burrow, because you don't have to think about it. You watch it. He does everything NFL wise you want. He's mobile. He's accurate. He can do everything. And I'm a Green Bay Packers fan. All right. Like to my core, I'm a Packers fan. I cover the Bengals. And if you asked me like what Burrow's ceiling is, like his absolute ceiling, I think he's the next Aaron Rodgers from a ceiling standpoint. I do.
That's a high ceiling.
It is. And that's how serious I take him as a prospect, and why, if you're really on the wish-wash, you might want to go back to the Bengals, because I think Burrow's the type of guy where if you build a competent NFL team around him, not even a great team, I think he's one of those quarterbacks that can get you the playoffs every year. A guy like Aaron Rodgers, a guy like Andrew Luck, a guy like Peyton Manning, a guy like Tom Brady, a guy like Russell Wilson. In that class of quarterback where Patrick Mahomes as well, if you have this guy, you're going to make the playoffs. You win your division, wild card, whatever, but you're guaranteed so many wins because he's that good. I think Joe Burrow is that good. And I think that's his ceiling. Now, will he settle in to be Tony Romo? I think he'll be a little better than Tony Romo. And Tony Romo, kind of historically underrated. Like, he was actually really good. I think he could be a little better than that. Like I said, I just buy into the guy. And when I'm throwing those Aaron Rodgers comparisons around, trust me, it is not light. It is. I don't take that lightly.
How would you
compare? What a perfect time for the Bengals to be bad. Like, and by the way, shout out to Dayton, Ohio, because it was the Dayton, Ohio high school field that AJ Green hurt his ankle on and missed the entire season because of. I mean, how could you make it just align it just right that you have your worst season since 2002, and it just so happens that a kid from southeastern Ohio that went to Ohio State had to go elsewhere to be a star, and then it just drops in your lap. The hometown kid comes back as a man, as a superstar to do it is insane.
As you said, this is like a story you want to make in Hollywood right now. Ohio boy leaves Ohio and comes back to save one of his franchises. But then there's also been some other discussions about other teams maybe moving up to try to get that pick, like the Miami Dolphins. Do you think that has some truth to it, that teams want to try to pry up and get to that number one pick to get Burrow? Or do you think that's kind of, for lack of better words, bullshit? And they're trying to get just to make a fuss out of nothing.
Let me ask you, does it snow in hell?
No.
Because I don't think it does. And I don't think there is a way that the Dolphins are able, because no other team has the ammunition that the Miami Dolphins have. Right. There's been no other team in recent memory. I would probably go as far back as the then St. Louis Rams in 2012 when they got those 3 firsts from Washington for Robert Griffin. That's the last time a team had like this much draft capital. And even then, I just don't think there's anything. It's almost like this. If someone is that eager to get, like, if you had this ring that I don't think much of it, blah blah blah, and this guy is really trying to buy it from you and keeps upping up the price, it's probably more valuable than what he's offering you. And I think that's kind of the case with Joe Burrow. I think that Mike Brown at the Combine talked to Joe Burrow, and when the owner is there to talk to that top prospect to get that, and with the way that he allowed Zach Taylor to bench Andy Dalton to get Ryan Finley some looks, I think the writing is on the wall, has been on the wall. I think that it's a crucial time for him to make the fan base happy. And when you can do that, you can get a hometown kid that you can build an entire, like you said, story. This could be one of the top stories in the history of the NFL that they tell forever. A hometown kid, hardworking, son of a coach, comes home, the hometown team, a Super Bowl, even though they're technically not the hometown team, but we'll scrub over that part of history. It's too good to pass up. And I think the Bengals know that. I think everybody around the league knows that. And apparently the Dolphins are in love with Joe Burrow. And if that's the case, then you know what you've got to do. And I don't find – there was a little bit in me, I'll tell you, that I really did think there for a second that they might sniff around Tua just because Tua was the hot guy. He is the draw, the superstar, coming out of Alabama, star quarterback. There was a part of me that thought that for just a tad bit, it's like you asked. I don't think there is a chance they could give up. They have 3 first-round picks this year and 2 first-round picks next year that they could offer up for Joe Burrow. And it's crazy I'm saying this, but that probably wouldn't even be enough for me to let go of what I think Joe Burrow can be. Now that's risky because you can drop to 5, get Herbert or Tua, and then you have 4 other first-round picks to build around him. But when you got a guy like, let me ask you this: do you think the Chiefs would trade Pat Mahomes for those 5 first-round picks?
No.
No, I don't think
Yeah.
that the Bengals are going to trade Joe Burrow away for it.
Like we've kind of mentioned, especially for me being an Ohio kid, I mean, what a story that is to have one of your own come back, and especially to a city like Cincinnati, who, when it comes to sports, really needs something to help them get going right now.
Yeah.
The Bengals have had their issues. The Reds, they had an MLS team that had so much hype around it, get manhandled the last year. So Cincinnati needs this win right now.
The one thing that you can always sell and it's always going to be bought is hope. And
Yes.
there's not one token, there's not one piece in all of Cincinnati sports that is a piece that Joe Burrow could bring in the terms of hope.
Now, you brought up a name that I did want to talk about, because before Joe Burrow became the talk of being the number 1 pick, the guy that other people were hyping up to be this next in a lifetime superstar was Tua. But a hip injury kind of pulled him away from that spot. So with that hip injury and what it impacted him with, what do you feel like the ceiling is for Tua in the NFL? And where do you think he might go also?
Both of those questions are great questions, just because I think there is a little bit about both that you're just unsure of, from the terms of what he can be, what about his injury history, and what about the team that is willing to take that, what now is perceived as a chance on him. And I'm glad you asked all 3 of those questions, because I kind of want to get into something that I kind of spitballed earlier getting ready for this, was if there was a time to pick Tua to recover fully and you have a year with him in the system, wouldn't it be a year where you're not sure if you're even going to have a season? If you're even going to have a season, and let's say, because what if we don't have an NFL season and we turn around and we have a 2021 NFL draft? Because I don't see him scrapping a draft. Do you do the same draft order? Do you roll that draft order around? How does that get solved? What do we have to do there? That's why it's interesting to see if there's a team that we don't know what's going to happen. Might as well take the big jump. Let them either A, sit for a year, or B, take this year off and do this. And I don't mean to go into another part of talking about if we have a season and what that could look like, but that's kind of important to what Tua's aspect is now. And I'm sure that GMs and more specifically coaches are thinking, we need who we got in the building to win a Super Bowl this year, COVID, or not. Like, that's what we need to prepare for. Fair enough. I won't take that away from anybody. But so first, let's talk about Tua and the injuries. I am worried that the ankle thing keeps happening, because, you got to have ankles to play that position, especially if you want to plant off your feet, do all of that. That's worrisome. Even more than the hip to me, because I'm no doctor, but from what I was told from, Ian Rappaport, Adam Schefter, all the people that report on it, is that that's supposed to be an injury you can heal from, like 100%. So if that's the case, the nagging injuries, it can happen to anybody, but then you look in the NFL and you see someone like, Cam Newton, where the abuse piles up over the years and they just kind of change as a player. You look at Andrew Luck, where he's like, I'm out. Like, it's too much. Like, these injuries and stuff, can't do it. So with Tua, especially since he hasn't been able to get in the building, you just kind of have to go with it. You have to pretty much either A, take him off your board and say, we're not drafting the kid because we don't know what he is health-wise. Or B, you say, here's his 2019 tape, here's his 2018 tape, we're taking him high. Because that's the only 2 ways you can go with it. There is no one way or another, because we didn't have, the traditional kind of process. So that leads to, kind of what teams, or I guess you asked who he could be in the NFL.
Right. I asked that, and then teams he could go to. So the team that he has the most prospect around is the Dolphins, and then
Mm-hmm.
after the Dolphins is the Chargers. And if he
Mm-hmm.
says like what you're saying, it might be a good time. If hypothetically, let's say there is still going to be a 2020 season, you've got Ryan Fitzpatrick to sit behind or Tyrod Taylor to sit behind in those
Yes.
spots. And that's what I'm trying to see, because compared to Tua, let's say we are having a 2020 season, you could pick Tua and the potential he has, or you have two other good prospects that are both healthy that you can pick from, in Herbert and Love.
Mm-hmm. Jordan Love falls under the Deshaun Kaiser element of my love, where I love toolsy quarterbacks, guys with beautiful throwing motions, big arms, and accuracy when it's on. That's why I loved Josh Allen. I thought Josh Allen was just like I thought Josh Allen could be the man someday. Just if everything got together, and we'll see if that ever works out. This is where I see with Tua. There's one of two things that are going to happen. Only one of two things, in my opinion. Now, you can check back next Thursday, and I was completely wrong, but he is either going to go in the top 6 or he's going to drop, and he is going to drop far. And those are the two things that I think can happen. And I think the more and more you hear about stuff that comes out now, which could very well be smoke screens, we don't want anybody to kind of, take them from us. And I do believe in the end that Tua is going to go in the top 6. There's a lot of smoke with Justin Herbert in Miami. And I think it's interesting that around at the end of last season, when Flores was getting hired and the Dolphins bottomed out, Schefter reported that they were pretty much going to tank that season and that they were looking at Tua.
Thank you, Tua. Yeah.
And those reports, I've seen similar reports off the top of my head. I can't remember the other ones that I've seen, but those reports that kind of go and then they got swept under the rug, those typically are true. But it was really around that November mark, and I don't know if Tua had been hurt yet or whatnot, that the Dolphins just started winning out of nowhere after they tanked and whatnot, and they took themselves out of the Tua Joe Burrow spot, which makes you think, well, maybe they loved all the quarterbacks, they didn't want this, or maybe the team just really tried hard. I don't know. But if we're taking the recent reports that Justin Herbert's Miami's guy, all right, I'm not sure. I think that he'll end up going to Miami. And then about 75% sure, unless this Herbert thing's real, then I cannot see a world where the Chargers pass on them because they're going to need fill their stadiums.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting is, like, let's say these NFL GMs and coaches say, we got to take them off the board. We can't have them up there. You drop from the top 10 into the 20s or into the late teens. Because if those teams aren't going to take you and these teams have you off your board, Atlanta doesn't need a quarterback, Dallas doesn't need a quarterback, San Francisco doesn't need a quarterback. Then you get into, does New Orleans trade up for him?
Mm-hmm.
Does New England trade up for him? Or does Green Bay trade up for him? And kind of have that same Aaron Rodgers situation all over again.
Well, you just said if he doesn't go in those first 6, he could drop to the 20s. At the 23rd pick is the New England Patriots, who, as we know now, needs a quarterback.
I thought the more interesting route was Green Bay, of course, to succeed Aaron Rodgers, but as a Packers fan, of course, that's the way that I kind of get more interested in that. But no, I think it's almost poetic, Tom Brady was the 199th pick. He was a 6th rounder, obviously but imagine the superstar, humble kid that gets hurt and everybody gives up on him, and here comes Belichick. And he's like, you're going to be my star. You're going to be my guy. Like, we trust in you. And honestly, McDaniel's offense, where Tom Brady, it was timing, poise, accuracy. If you want a quarterback in this draft, he's kind of – and you want it to fit those 3 criteria, he's right up there with Burrow equally in the terms of like that old-style Bill Walsh West Coast offense, or you want 3-step drop and timing and all that. Tua is your guy. He is the one to kind of deliver that type of offense. So you're completely right. If New England's the one that is looking at Tua, they'll do what it takes, and he would be mighty, mighty dangerous in that system.
Well, it'll be interesting to see where Tua does wind up. And we've talked a little bit about Burrow, and we've talked a little about Tua and a few other stars as well. But as you know, Angelo, my show is a Kentucky-centric show. So we talk about all things Kentucky, including UK sports. And when it comes to where we live at in Lexington, there's only one name that people want to know where they're going, and that's Lynn Bowden, our wide receiver turned QB this last season here. And so Lynn Bowden is going to be entering this draft here, and I want to get your thoughts on how you feel about Lynn Bowden going into the draft, where you see he might be, where he might wind up, and what his ceiling might be, because this is a draft that's very, very saturated with wide receivers. So kind of interested to see what might happen to Bowden in this draft.
I have about 4 different ways I can go with this, and I'll start at the very top, is that I think Lynn Bowden's a top 50 player in this class. I think when you see the type of skill set that he has with his ability to run the ball and his ability to be an all-purpose player, like he was an all-purpose AP first-team All-American at the all-purpose slot. He led the SEC in rushing in 8 games. He won the Missouri game last year, which was a pivotal tipping point into keeping Kentucky in the SEC East title race, where he had the game of his career up until the last 8 games, in which he had 6 or 7 best games of his career in that span. I think that him not being able to run and do testing numbers is either going to keep him out of a top pick or was a saving grace. And the reason why I say that is this. I don't actually know how Lynn would have tested. I think when you see him on the field, a lot of it seems more game speed than maybe time speed, and especially with how smart he is and the way that he sees the football game. If he would have ran a 4.41 and jumped 37 inches, the kid, I think, would have had a chance at the late first round. I don't see a world where he couldn't have been in that Brandon Ayuk, Denzel Mims, T. Higgins type of class of receiver, which is that kind of that next rung in the late first round. I mean, as a Packers fan, I want to see him in green and gold. I want to see him at pick 30. But if he would have tested poorly, I think with, like you said, how big the market is for wide receivers, he could have dropped. I'm not sure if he will be the top 50 guy. I think when coaches see who he is and what he can bring, the only thing that hurts is that he's positionless in a way because he's kind of lacked the wide receiver reps as of late. But I kind of turn it into a different thing. And this is where I truly think he could star at in the NFL. And I think he could be a star at running back in a Le'Veon Bell, Christian McCaffrey-like way. And because I think he has the build to take a lot of the load, especially when he gets in the NFL and gets even bigger than he already is. Because what a lot of people might not know about Lynn is, like, being there up close and personal with him, he is taller and he is thicker than you think he is. And that's why he was able to take that wear and tear of that 8-game stretch. I mean, he put it up like 1,460 yards or something rushing in those stretches. So if it was me and I was trying to be creative with him, Le'Veon Bell was essentially a wide receiver 2 and their top runner. Christian McCaffrey had 1,000 and 1,000 last year rushing and receiving yards. I don't know if he can take that rushing load, but you can use him in that type of way, and you can use him as a slot receiver. You can use him on gadget plays. You can use him as a returner. And if you're a coach and you see the positive sides of it, instead of saying that he's positionless, you can say, then that's the guy. And you can see him going a lot higher than a lot of people think. So, I mean, that's my guess from mock drafts and whatnot, which those can always be, here or there. He's usually going a little later than I think what we saw at Kentucky. I think when it's all said and done and coaches get to talk to him and they see the tape, I really do think that he's going to end up in day 2, which is the 2nd and 3rd round. And in one of those 2 rounds, I think, is where he ends up.
Where and I haven't really seen too much. Where do a lot of the quote-unquote experts, the Mel Kipers, see him going right now?
Well, you know what? It's funny that you brought up specifically Mel Kiper, because Mel Kiper's the guy since like January has brought Lynn up every time they talk about late 1 receivers. It's always funny when he talks about, because there's Jerry Jeudy, there's CeeDee Lamb, there's Henry Ruggs, there's Laviska Shenault, there's Denzel Mims, there's Justin Jefferson. But at the tail end, when right before he stops talking about those names of receivers, he says Lynn Bowden. Yeah. And Gil Brandt is an older, type of guy. He came out with his top 10 receivers, and he had Lynn Bowden at 7. seventh
Mm.
of the receivers in this class. So while the mock drafts and the rankings I see that kind of maybe have him, I've seen a positional rankings that have him as low as like the 185th player in the draft, like that
Wow.
low of a guy, which would put it about the fifth to sixth round.
That's a Whole Foods steak at a Walmart price right there.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I really think that when it's all said and done, I haven't seen many recent projections on him. I do think that he's going to end up in day 2. I think we're going to see him go in the second or third round.
Well, that'd be a good spot for him then to see what
Randall Cobb.
Well, that's who he's always been compared to. So, I mean, to see if he has a career similar to Cobb or even better than that. I know there's a lot of hype around Lynn Bowden, so definitely.
I think that what it's going to have to be, and Lynn Bowden's a guy that I've compared to. The running backs are kind of a high point. The low point is Cordero Patterson, who was a first team, or he was an NFL All-Pro as a returner. I think Cordero was a little more athletic coming out of Tennessee, but again, it's just kind of like Randall Cobb was more of a pure receiver. Like, he could play the position, and it was really easy for him with his athleticism to be that slot guy or even sometimes an outside guy. Whereas if you want Lynn to be the receiver Lynn Bowden is, or Randall Cobb is, I'm not 100% sure that is his absolute best fit, which is why I pushed that running back part, because Lynn's so much bigger than Cobb. But I think in the terms of what you see from an overall player to impact a game, I think Lynn has the potential to have a bigger impact on the NFL and in the culture of the NFL is Lynn. I think he has a Marshawn Lynch level of personality if he's able to star, and if he's able, maybe not Marshawn level with kind of like that hilarity that he brings, but Lynn's a soldier, man. Like, the way he talks, the way he is, he's all about football. He's super serious about it, and he's just got that thing about him that I think that, especially if coaches were able to get in front of. To give you a team, by the way, I think he could go to is the Dallas Cowboys. The reason why I say that is because Lynn's first game at quarterback was on Jared Lorenzen Appreciation Day against Arkansas. And as I'm leaving the press box to go downstairs for to go outside and get all the interviews and whatnot, there's this big horde of people, and I'm trying to get on the elevator, and this one guy stops me, and I'm like, I'm going on the elevator to go downstairs. Who are you? And then he kind of motions me in, and I get on the elevator. I'm like, that's weird. And I'm sitting there texting on my phone, and I look up, and there is none other than Jerry Jones in the elevator with me. Jerry Jones was live at Kroger Field to watch Lynn Bowden's performance against Arkansas.
Wow. Which makes sense because he's an Arkansas guy. So
exactly.
Yeah,
so if you're looking for a second-round landing spot for Lynn Bowden, and, Dallas just lost who? Randall Cobb. They just lost him to the Houston Texans. He fills that spot where you have Gallup and Cooper, and then you slide Cobb right in, or you slide Bowden right in there in the slot, and I don't know. That's just been ever since I saw Jerry there. I was like, you know what, man, it's too perfect not to happen. And if there's one helmet that Lynn needs to wear after this is all said and done, love him or hate him, he needs to go somewhere where the stars play, and there's not a brighter star that shines bright in the NFL than the Dallas Cowboys. It's just true.
Well, we'll see if we can see Lynn Bowden and Jerry World here next year, hopefully, if there is a next year, because as we've kind of talked about in that last segment, and you kind of mentioned at the start of the show here, so you're kind of prepping to see if, as far as where all this COVID-19 stuff goes, if we're even going to have a season. So that's what I want to ask you on your personal thoughts and where you think things are going to be with the circumstances we're kind of under right now. Do you see there being a 2020 NFL season or 2020 college football season, or do you think they might cancel it or adjust it even a little bit from what is already in place right now?
I would say that I veer more towards the pessimistic side of this, in which I guess that I can kind of see as maybe more of a reality in just the terms of I read a lot of I read the Imperial report that came out, and I read some of the U.S. doc that came out about what's going on. And the truth of the matter is that if a vaccine takes 18 months and they can't expedite that process, then today is no different than month 17, because the people that are susceptible and that are going to be symptomatic are going to be susceptible and symptomatic then as they are now until they get a vaccine. And of course our science is going to develop between now and then. Of course, the economy has to get back going, but the one thing America has done right is not sacrificed human life for the economy. And that's what we've been seeing, and why we're all quarantined and why all business is shut down. So if you're doing this now, and like I said earlier, without a vaccine and without protection, it's still going to spread. It's not just going to go away. And if that's the case, then how can you justify in 4 months that we start preseason or training camp or the first weekend of college football, unless there is some type of miracle, which I hope happens, that we get an expedited vaccine that works, or something breaks the right way, or people talked about the summer, killing it for the time being and it coming back. Like, I don't know about all that. We'll see. But if none of that happens, I don't see how you can justify it. I don't.
That's been some of the conversation that's been of late, because you've seen like what the MLB is trying to do. They're trying to find ways to still play their games in Arizona with no fans. And when we start looking into the summer months and stuff like that, with everything going on, which still has a lot of uncertainty, that's training camps being missed, like you said. That's time with these players, these new draft picks, to spend with their coaches, to spend with their teams that they can't do. And even if we do get to the point where it's like, okay, the economy's back up and everyone can go see each other again, it's not like we're going to be filling 80,000 person stadiums with people at that point either. So this, I think there is still going to be an aftermath to it. I'm not quite as, I'm not quite as sure.
You can say doom and gloom if you're talking about me. So doom and gloom about it.
No, yeah, fine. I'm not as doom and gloom about the season as far as like, oh, the entire season's a wash at this point here. But I think there's going to be more to come with where things are at still, even if we don't see them after the COVID social distancing aspects are past us. There'll still be some aftermath of it, and it's going to be interesting to see what that impact's going to have.
And I think that the whole thing, it just depends on the curve that everyone talks about. And that's why when everybody comes back, it's going to be so, risky. I know that what they're trying to do is just quell it now so you can make more ventilators, make more masks, make more protection for everything. Because like when people say, oh, there are so many deaths from the flu because of this and that. Well, we're prepared for the flu. We can do everything we can to stop it. But if it happens, it happens to happen, well, then the person that's susceptible is just going to go, unfortunately. But this is a situation where you know that it's going to get dangerous, like Italy level dangerous, and you want to prevent that from happening, which is why it's so extreme now. There is a world maybe where all these ventilators are made, no matter what the curve is, and maybe the more people are exposed, and you have the support from the hospitals where they can say we can handle any worst case scenarios that happen, well, then you can kind of do everything, because 25% of the population isn't really going to be affected by it. Another only 30% of the people are going to be symptomatic and then have to go to the hospital, and then it breaks down into 15%, whatever. But maybe that's the thing, is if this flattens enough to where the hospitals can handle everything, and no matter when we get back up how that happens, even if we have to go back in quarantine and then go back to normal, well, then you have your best case scenario of the people that are immune, they're fine. The people that have overcome it and they're good, you hope for that, and then all that. So there is a world where if the hospitals can get back up and they can handle it, and maybe we will. So you're like, there is a scenario where that can happen. It just seems, it's just right now for me, and I guess it's because we're living in the midst of it. I'm prepping for 18 months mentally. Like, here we go. This is gonna suck.
Well, we're hoping sports will come back sooner than later. We need to get Angelo back on radio so he can talk about this stuff again.
Yes.
But
Yes. I'm so ready, man. I really want to be able, and I'll tweet it out if you want to follow me at Angelo Media Lex, that if I can do a post draft show on Sunday morning after the weekend after the draft, I will do that. But we'll see right now. I'd like to get a draft show in. You can follow me to keep up on that. Do my best to get back on the radio as soon as possible. Until then, it's just going to be, I don't know. I haven't really tweeted much lately either because I kind of just watch game stuff and then forget all about tweeting. So I need to get better on my tweet game.
I know before all the COVID stuff happened, and even last season, that you also said that you do play-by-play for Varsity Game Night. And I was affectionately going to refer to you as the voice of Varsity Game Night when the show started here. But that's something I wanted to talk to you about too. So you get to travel around Lexington and see all these different high school stars that are playing. And I know one of the big teams that have been around this past season was Frederick Douglass, who I think had like 11 kids go D1. Is that right?
Close to it.
Close to it. A good amount. So with you seeing all these different players play in high school and go to these D1 schools and these other schools, who are some guys we should keep on the lookout for that we could see in the NFL draft one day?
Oh man, this is fun just because of the guy. Like really, it's a lot of it has been propped up lately because right before I hit the scene, it was Lafayette because Lafayette had produced Landon Young and Jedrick Wills. And Jedrick Wills is a guy that's going maybe 4th overall. He played at Lafayette. That's how, close that connection is. We might have a kid from Lafayette High School going 4th overall in the NFL draft. And that to me is just, it blows my mind in such a good way. And I really like that. And while I think a lot of the talent in the city, it really has boom bust periods kind of. A lot of the other schools are down, but Frederick Douglass right now is bringing the heat with real D1 kids coming out of there. And this last year, I'm not sure if there were 11 D1. I think there might have been 11 college scholarship kids, maybe more, because I'm trying to think, maybe 11 D1 kids since they've started. Mm-hmm. They've been around for 3 years and have made quite the mark. If I'm not mistaken.
I know a couple kids are going to Clemson, right?
Well, we've got one kid that's going to Clemson named Walker Parks, who's David Parks' son, who's known locally, and Walker committed before the season last year, never wavered on it. He was going to Clemson to play for Dabo. He is an offensive line prospect, and he was a good offensive lineman, like watching him, but it's a little harder to see that with all the other kids going on. Defensively, he was awesome this last year watching him play. So Walker is going to Clemson. Cameron Jones, who was their quarterback, went to Cincinnati to play. Big kid, about 6'8", 6'7", in that range, as kind of an athlete, but to-play quarterback. A guy that I think has a really potentially special career ahead of him if he gets in the right position is Devin Neal Jr., who I thought could maybe even play running back at the next level for how good he was playing there at the end of the year at the running back position. I mean, the kid was unstoppable. And then probably the most highly rated, shout out to Jagger Burton too, who's going to be the top rated in-state player, probably the number one player in the state next year in 2021, plays offensive and defensive line for Frederick Douglass. But a kid that's come back from the IMG Academy, he played freshman, sophomore year at Frederick Douglass, went to IMG, is back for his senior year, is Dakel Crowdis. And he's a guy that plays wide receiver. I think he's being looked at for wide receiver and corner. Just an overall tremendous athlete, super long arms, great speed. I know he's been clocked in the 4.4s. He has offers from every major program you can think of, including a lot of the ones he kind of tweets about. It seems like Oklahoma's the one he kind of fancies the most. From what he's exhibited on social media, but he also had UK in that mix. He had Texas in that mix. I think Oregon offered him, Ohio State offered him, Florida State offered him, Auburn, LSU. Like I'm not sure about LSU actually, but like all of those teams have offered him. So he's probably the highest rated prospect since Jedrick Wills, and he's a guy that if we have a high school football season next year, which I I really hope we do, because to see his senior year along with Jaggers, you'd be getting two high level, not medium level. I'm talking about high Power 5 level guys,
Mm.
where Jagger got offered by Clemson, Ohio State, and Texas. So you're talking about a lineman getting offered there, and then Daykel getting offered the same places to play wide receiver or corner. Man, like that, it's Frederick Douglass is doing something special there, and you really get to see some high level players and high level kids as well come out of that program.
Outside of Frederick Douglass, is there any other kids we should keep a lookout for around Lexington or the Central Kentucky area?
Oh man, I
I
let
mean,
let me let me think for a second. I know that.
I know there's been a lot of hype around Bo Allen, who was Lexington Catholic,
Oh yes,
going to
okay.
UK now.
Yeah, that helps a little bit when we go back to the players definitely that we've seen. Bo Allen, Coach Stoops, when I was at the signing day press conference, really went out of his way to make sure that everybody knew that, even though Joey Gatewood was coming in, like Bo Allen was the key to the class. Like that was the guy that they had to fill everything else around there. And I don't know how much of that's political. I don't know how much of that is that he truly means it. But if you're talking about a guy like I don't care to say it, he was the Joe Burrow of high school with the way that he was able to step up in the pot. He did the same thing Joe Burrow did: drop back, slip under the outside, go outside, and put dimes around the field. Um, Dan, I don't know if you really watch too much high school football or if you've been able to recently, but kids can't really throw downfield in high school football. It's really hard. You usually either put your best athletes out there or kids that are accurate short range.
Mm.
Bo, even as a junior, and his hype goes back to his sophomore year, he had like these complex, like four receivers deep, patterns, and was putting dime after dime after dime, 40, 50, 60 yards downfield. The kid is everything that you want out of a pro spread to air raid style of offense. Um, I think the world of him as a hopefully a great college quarterback, and maybe if you put him in the right system, maybe the next Tim Couch at Kentucky.
Wow.
I hope. I hope. I'm not saying for
So,
sure he is. I'm not trying to put that pressure on him. I'm just saying when I see him and I think, because usually I'm a glass half full guy, man. Like you give me a player or a team, I usually go half full. So that would be my half full hope for Bo Allen.
it sounds like we're pretty well set at quarterback at UK for the next.
I think we're okay. I think we're
Yeah,
doing okay. I think we're
between
doing all
Terry
right.
Wilson and yeah, and everyone else is a man. So yeah, Angela, but it's been awesome to talk the NFL draft, man, and go down a lot of different avenues here with Joe Burrow, the Cincinnati Bengals, Lynn Bowden, UK, and a lot of the high school prospects we have coming out here at Lexington. I also promised you some time here to talk about some wrestling as well. So I know by the time
I
this
was
episode
wondering
comes,
if we were going to fit it in. I was wondering
oh
there at the
yes.
end. I was like, "Oh no, we're not going to talk wrestling." All right, now it's game time. Now it's game time.
So I know we're a couple weeks removed, but we did have WrestleMania, and if there's anything else, everything else got canceled this season. I tweeted out a few weeks ago. I said, you know what, here in Lexington, we've lost Bourbon Tours, we've lost Keeneland, we've lost college basketball, but at least we still have WrestleMania. And
Yep.
and last a few weeks ago, we did get to see WrestleMania for 2 nights in Orlando. So, what were your thoughts about WrestleMania as a whole?
Well, I thought they did about as good of a job as they could, given the circumstances. I thought even though night two had the star power, I think that night one was kind of the more well built show, I guess.
Yes.
I would say my favorite wrestling match of the weekend would go to Seth Rollins and Kevin Owens.
Mm.
I thought for the story that they've been building up to and the way that they played out, on top of getting to hear their dialogue during the match and into the very way it ended, I really thought that was well done. I know the Boneyard match, it was pretty good. Um, the Edge and Randy Orton thing was, I think, to everybody maybe a little too long, but I thought the
Mm.
ending of the match was great. My favorite thing of the entire weekend, because my favorite wrestler for the past 5 years has been Bray Wyatt in The Fiend. well, Bray Wyatt, the Fiend, recently, but he's been my favorite wrestler for a long time now, and which is funny because my second favorite is Braun, and I didn't even mention him beating Goldberg. But that thing with John Cena was everything you could have hoped for and more, from like giving him the reins to do his thing, and John Cena just kind of let him tear him down like that entire time. Kind of like it was, Bray almost spoke for, I guess, the internet wrestling community, and I thought that was masterful, and it culminated with Drew beating Brock. So I mean, it was for not having a crowd. It was pretty good, and I think it really helped him being able to do the. I always thought that WrestleMania should be on one night because that's the one night of the year you always hope for. But it was kind of cool having two nights. Two different days you get to look forward to things.
It made it easier to process compared to, like, do you remember last year's WrestleMania? It was like 7 hours, and you're like,
oh man, I remember WrestleMania. I think it was WrestleMania 33 I think it was in Orlando. Like you were saying, it was the one where Undertaker, Roman Reigns main evented.
Yeah, that was Orlando.
Oh my gosh, my girlfriend at the time and my little sister, who was excited to watch it, they both fell asleep before the last match because it went on from like 7 to 1:30 or 2, and I was like, man, this is a long haul.
The two match. So I like that there was kind of a break in between. We could have like a little bit of breathing room.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the two matches that you mentioned that I think I love the most, even though they weren't, I guess you could say, from purist matches,
mm-hmm.
were the Boneyard match and the Firefly Funhouse match. Because
yeah.
the Boneyard match, so I'll be honest with you, before going into it, I was a little worried about Undertaker AJ Styles because I've watched Undertaker the last couple of years, and I was very worried that this was not going to be a very good match for him.
I know what you're saying. He's not had 5-star matches here in the last couple rounds.
No. And I think for what they did, they made him look good. They made AJ also look good, I felt. But I think it was the best way you could have made Undertaker still look good at 55 with all the damage he's had.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah,
I couldn't because it was. I was curious to why it main evented because it had arguably kind of the, iffiest buildup to out of all the major matches. But they knew what they were doing. It put it on last. I actually think that AJ really, really took his lumps to make the Undertaker look good in the process. But yes, I thought that, you kind of strip him of the whole dead man thing. You kind of make him more of just like, I'm an old man, but I'm still a badass. And I think Undertaker's been wanting to do that for a while, and he knew maybe that's what it took for his longevity. Is like, look, I'm still, the American I'm still that guy, even if I'm an old man. And you're right. They couldn't have done it better for what what he had become, or what he's become.
How do you feel about AEW since they've gotten started?
I'm a little in between on it right now. I think they're feeling themselves out, and they're trying to figure out who they are. Right now, it kind of seems like that they tailor their show towards the internet wrestling community, in my opinion, the IWC. They kind of want their shows to be for the hardcore fans. And I agree with it as well. I think if you need that wrestling base, you need a base to get money off of when you're starting up a new company. And they're doing a very good job of like taking shots at WWE, taking their underutilized talents and bringing them there to be what people think they should be, promoting talents from other, promotions, like bringing Kenny from NJPW and doing all of that stuff. I like that it's different. Like that it's more middle fingers and cussing and more kind of, we get to do what we want to do. And they have a lot of variety on the show as well, which I like. I do think that there's some of it that's could be more subtle. I think that the way they kind of do like the way Brody Lee's been introduced recently, like I thought that was kind of a miss, like swing and a miss. I thought I thought they did Matt Hardy, okay with a couple of their things that they do, but that's, I guess, just down to your personal preference, like just what I like. But I think it's fun that there's something new and different. Kind of wish I didn't have to buy the pay-per-views because WWE makes it so easy to pay $10. Here's a pay-per-view. $10. Here's a pay-per-view. It makes it. I guess it makes it a little more worth it in that. But what do you think about AEW? Where do you fall on it?
So I think the wrestling content aspect is better. So I love watching their matches more. There's still some stories that I think I like better from NXT, better than from AEW. But one of the things I also like about AEW is they're willing to try stuff and fail, which I don't think sometimes WWE will do. Like they'll try something and it'll fail, but they'll still keep pushing it for like weeks and weeks to come.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Where AEW, like I know one example was whatever Brandy Rhodes stable was supposed to be.
Oh, what was that called? It was like because they had the Dark Order and she had like the Black Covenant
Chris
or something. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah. And they tried it for like 2 weeks and it didn't work out, and they were like, all right, let's kibosh it. If they did that in WWE, we'd see that for 16 months.
Oh my gosh! So, I mean, countless people, or 16 years, Roman Reigns.
They
really don't. And you can give WWE credit every now and then, like they did the Firefly Funhouse. They did let the Fiend kind of run wild and build SmackDown, their A show now, around him. But you're right, they do things sometimes, which I guess recently they've done a little bit better of. And by the way, I'll push back on one thing. I do think that Raw always has great matches. And I know that sounds weird, but they give the time to guys that if you put them in AEW, I always feel this, and I just want to get this out in the ether. People would say that Raw has horrible matches and horrible shows all the time, while at the same time opening the show with a 30-minute Finn Balor Kevin Owens match. Or like a Drew McIntyre Ricochet match, or an Andrade, an Andrade, give me whoever recent face of NXT. You know what I mean? Like those matches where you'd start off the show and you would get these, and I do feel like sometimes WWE closed the show with Andrade Drew McIntyre the other night, and they put in Aleister Black and did he actually fight someone good this week? I can't remember.
They got the talent to make these type of good matches, which is
yes, they do.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's why I loved like the Rollins Owens matches. It was just like it was right down that kind of AEW style. Like if that match was on AEW, I truly think it would be lauded. Like I thought it was so good from a storytelling aspect, which is why also to your point, I need to watch the AEW pay-per-views because I feel like if I was able to watch their pay-per-view matches, I would be more to be like, oh my gosh, AEW, look at what they're doing. But because it's a $50, $60 buy-in and I don't want to do that, then it's hard for me to catch the Hangman Page Kenny Omega versus the Young Bucks match or the Jericho Moxley match or something like that. You know what I mean? Like it makes it harder for me to see the top of what their product is.
Well, Angelo, if my listeners want to find out where they can find you as far as NFL draft content or wrestling content goes, where can my listeners find you at right now?
The easiest place to keep up with what I'm doing, whether it's on the radio, whether it's what I'm thinking at the moment about all these different things. I try to live tweet, pay-per-views and all that, and to give it away at Angelo Media Lex is the way. Just follow me on there. And I give updates on when I'm on the radio, what shows I'm doing, what content's coming out. I love to tweet about the NBA. I'll tweet about UK stuff. I'll tweet about the NFL draft, the NFL, all that stuff. But if you want to keep up with what I'm doing and where I'm going with things, at Angelo Media Lex is the place to hit that follow button.
Well, Angelo, it's been a fun conversation with you here today, man, to talk a little NFL draft, talk wrestling, and everything else in between, man. So hopefully this isn't the last time we get to talk to each other, man. So hopefully we get to talk to each other a little more down the road, and maybe you come on a few more times to Friends in the Corner podcast as well.
Hey, if you'll have me, I'll come on. Definitely. It's always fun to talk to someone about the NFL draft and wrestling. It's two of my favorite things.
Till next time, Angelo. We'll see you next time, brother.
Sounds good, man.
All right, and that is it for our interview with Angelo Carriero. I want to thank Angelo for coming on and sharing some of his knowledge about the draft, and we're excited to see what's going to happen this Thursday. If you want to keep up to date with everything going on with Angelo, check him out on Twitter at AngeloMediaLex. And while you're following him, be sure to follow us as well. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at FITC Podcast. That's FITC Podcast. Be sure to check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/FITC Podcast and email the show at friendsinthecorner@gmail.com. That's friendsinthecorner, altogether lowercase, @gmail.com. But guys, it's going to be a fun weekend for sure, so excited to see what's going to happen this Thursday with the draft, see where Burrow goes, see where Lynn Bowden goes, and we'll try to do a recap episode as soon as it's all done. So stay tuned for that. Until then, stay happy, stay healthy, stay blessed, and we'll see you on the next episode of Friends in the Corner podcast. That's a wrap.